Hi you guys, you just finished the video, the math antics video on the order of operations, so hopefully that was a good review for you. Remember, the order of operations is something you need to follow anytime you are simplifying a numeric expression. So we're going to practice that today. These practice problems are quite challenging, but I know that you can do this. Okay, so I want you to start on the side that says order of operations with rational numbers practice problems. So I'm going to do 3 of the problems for you from this side, and I'm going to do 3 of the problems for you from the other side. And then I'm going to have you finish the other 6 problems and come check them off with me so I can make sure you are proficient with this skill. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so just as a review, the order of operations tells us that we do parentheses first, anything in the parentheses. Then we do exponents. Then we do all multiplications and divisions. We don't necessarily do multiplication before division. We do all multiplications and divisions. Whatever comes first in the problem, we do that first. Okay, so we're going to work left to right. And then we do all of the additions and subtractions. And remember, you don't necessarily do addition before subtraction. If subtraction comes first in your problem, you do that first. Okay, so with addition and subtraction, you're just going to work left to right. So number 1 says 1 2/3 plus 1/2, which is right next to a parenthesis. So in math, we know that if there is a number next to a parenthesis, that's implied multiplication. And then we have 16 minus 24 inside the parentheses, and then we have a subtract 2/3. Okay, so if we are going to start with the parentheses first, inside our parentheses, we have 16 minus 24. We are going to change this subtraction to addition by doing 16 plus a negative 24. And then when we combine a 16 with a negative 24, we get a negative 8. Okay, so now we have 1 2/3 plus 1/2 times by negative 8, subtract 2/3. We don't have any exponents to take care of here. Okay, so then we're going to do all multiplications working left to right. So if we work left to right, we can see that the next thing that we come to as far as multiplications and divisions is this 1/2 times by negative 8. So to multiply 1/2 with 8, we put the 8 over 1. We do top times top over bottom times bottom. 1 times 8 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. And then remember, this was a positive times a negative. Okay, and negative 8 divided by 2, if we simplify that, it would be negative 4. Okay, so now we have 1 2/3, we have a negative 4, and we have a negative 2/3. So this is going to be adding a negative, same, change, change. Okay, now we can add in any order. Remember, that is the commutative property. So I'm going to rearrange this so that we have the 1 2/3 plus the negative 2/3 together plus the negative 4. Okay, when I do that, it's going to be very easy for me to see that if I add 1 2/3 with a negative 2/3, the 2/3 and the negative 2/3, those are going to cancel each other out, and I'm going to be left with just a 1 plus a negative 4, which is a negative 3. Final answer. Okay, let's go ahead and do number 2. Okay, number 2 says negative 10 times by 2.3 minus 1.7, that's what's in our parentheses, minus 0.5 times by a negative 14. Okay, remember, anytime a number is right next to a parentheses in math, that is implied multiplication. So, to follow the order of operations here, we start with the parentheses. Inside our parentheses, we have a 2.3 subtract 1.7, so I'm going to change this to adding a negative. Okay, so 2.3 and 1.7, we're going to subtract those two. I can't take 7 from 3, so I'm going to have to borrow from the 2, make it a 1. 13 minus 7 is 6. Okay, so that would be 0.6. Now we have negative 10 times by 0.6, subtract a 0.5 times by negative 14. So let's go ahead and do the problems, the multiplication that we have. Okay, we have two multiplication. We have negative 10 times 0.6, and we have a 0.5 times by a negative 14. And actually, because this is a subtraction, we can do keep, change here as well. That's going to make this a little bit easier. Okay, negative 10 times 0.6 is negative 6. Okay, if we take 10 and we multiply by 0.6, 6 times 0 is 0, 6 times 1 is 6. Remember, because there's one number to the right of the decimal in our problem, they should be one number to the right of the decimal in our answer, and a negative times a positive is a negative. Okay, then we're going to add that to, we need to multiply this. Okay, before we can do any addition, we need to take care of all of our multiplications. So 0.5 times 14, 14 times 0.5, 5 times 14 is 20, 5 times 1 is 5, so that would be 7. There's one number to the right of our decimal in our problem, so that means there needs to be one number to the right of the decimal in our answer. And we have a negative times a positive, which is a negative 7. Sorry, a negative times a negative. Okay, we have a negative times a negative, which leaves us with a positive 7. Okay, now we just need to combine a negative 6 with a positive 7, and that gives us a 1. Final answer. Okay, the next one I am going to do for you is number 5. We have a negative 3/2 times by negative 5.75 plus 2/3 plus 5 3/4. Okay, for this one, remember we want to do parentheses first, then exponents, then all the multiplications, divisions working left to right, all the additions and subtractions working left to right. Inside the parenthesis, we have a negative 5.75 plus 2/3 plus 5 3/4. So we need to either change both of these to decimals or both of them to fractions. I'm going to go ahead and change them both to fractions just because the other two numbers that we're working with is fractions. And I know that 0.75 as a fraction, this would be tenths, hundredths, that would be 75 hundredths. And 25 goes into 75 3 times, 25 goes into 100 4 times. So this would really be negative 5 3/4. Now I'm also going to use the commutative property on this. Remember, you can add in any order and it doesn't change the answer of your, or the value of your expression. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this so that the negative 5 3/4 and the positive 5 3/4 are together, and I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to add the 2/3. Okay, negative 5 3/4 and a positive 5 3/4, when I combine those, that's just going to be a 0. These just cancel each other out. Okay, 5 3/4 is actually the additive inverse of negative 5 3/4. It's what makes negative 5 3/4 0. In the parentheses then, we're left with just a 2/3, and now we're ready to multiply that by the negative 3/2. Remember, when you multiply fractions, you just do top times top over bottom times bottom. So negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, 2 times 3 is a positive 6, and a negative 6 divided by a positive 6 is a negative 1. Final answer. Okay, I now want you to flip to the back side of your worksheet, and we are going to do the order of operations with mixed rational numbers. I'm going to pick 3 to do with you on this page, and then I'm going to let you finish the rest and come check them off with me to see if you've got this skill down. So we're still doing order of operations. Anytime we are simplifying a numeric expression, we always follow order of operations. So you don't ever need to be told to follow order of operations. It's just something that you need to do. Okay, these are a little bit trickier. I am going to do one of the ones with the brackets for you. Okay, when you have brackets in your problem, you work in the innermost grouping symbols first. Okay, so when we look at this, we have 5. This bracket is like a multiplication. Inside the bracket, we have a negative 1.36 subtract a negative 4.5. And then we have a positive parentheses 6.83 plus 1/4. Now, in order to do this, we want to change either the fractions to decimals or the decimals to fractions. In this case, I'm actually going to change the fractions to decimals. I think that seems a little bit easier here. So 1.36 subtract a negative 4/5. I'm going to first change this subtraction by doing same, change, change. Okay, so now I'm doing a negative 1.36 plus a positive 4/5. I'm going to change this 4/5 to a decimal by taking the top number, dividing by the bottom number, and that is going to be 0.8. So, negative 1.36 plus 0.8. That's what we have inside of our bracket. That's still going to get multiplied by 5. We still have our 6.83 plus 1/4, and I'm going to change that to a decimal as well. 1 divided by 4. And I bet you some of you guys know these by now. 1/4 is 0.25. Okay? Negative 1.36 plus 0.8. These are different signs. So in order to combine them, I'm going to subtract the two numbers. 1.36 subtract 0.8. Add a 0 here. Borrow from this 1, make it a 0. 13 minus 8 is 5.56. And this should be negative because 1.36 is bigger than 0.8. Okay, that is now going to get multiplied by 5, but not until we take care of the operation in the other parentheses. Okay, so we always do all of our parentheses first. So 6.83 plus 0.25 is 7.08. Okay. Now we don't have any exponents. We do have multiplication. We have this right here that is multiplication. So we need to multiply the 5 with the 0.56. The 0.56 has a bigger number of digits, so I'm going to put that on the top, the 5 on the bottom. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 5 is 25 plus 3, which is 28. There are 2 numbers to the right of the decimal in my problem, so there needs to be 2 numbers to the right of the decimal in my answer. And a positive times a negative is a negative. Okay, we're almost done. Now we have a negative 2.8. We're adding that to a positive 7.08. Okay, these are different signs. When we combine these, we're going to end up having a positive answer. And to figure out what that answer is, we need to use subtraction. 8 minus 0 is 8. We can't take 8 from 0. We have to borrow from the 7, make it a 6. 10 minus 8 is 2. So we have 4.28 positive. Final answer. Whoa, that's lots of work, isn't it? Okay, The next one I am going to do for you is number 2. Okay, we have a 3/10 in parentheses plus a 7.94, subtract, and then in our other parentheses we have a negative 1.5, subtract an 8.5, and then that's going to be divided by 10. Okay, so here we go, parentheses first. Inside our parentheses, we have both a fraction and a decimal. And so in order to combine these, I'm going to change them both to decimals. 3/10 as a decimal is just written like this, 3/10. Okay, so then to combine those, 7.94 and 3/10, I'd line up the decimals, and that gives us 8.24. Minus, inside our other parenthesis, we have a negative 1.5, and as a decimal, that's just going to be a negative 1.5. Then we have a subtract 8.5, and then that's going to be divided by 10. Okay, here's where we're at. We're in this parenthesis right here. Okay, this is a subtraction problem, so we are going to do same, change, change. So now inside this parenthesis, I'm going to add the two numbers together. They're both negative, so I'm going to add them together, 8.5 and 1.5, and that gives me 10. Okay, that's what's inside this parenthesis. We have a subtraction sign out front, then we have an 8.24. We also have a divided by 10. Okay, at this point, remember order of operations says parentheses, then exponents, then all multiplications and divisions before we do any additions and subtractions. So next step is we are going to do this division before we do the subtraction. So 10 divided by 10, and sorry, a negative 1.5 and a positive negative 8.5, that's going to be a negative 10, isn't it? Because we do add the two numbers together, but then our answer needs to be negative. Okay, so here we go. A negative 10 divided by a positive 10, that's going to give us a negative 1. Okay, so we just took care of doing the division. We still have this subtraction, and we have 8.24. So now, last step, 8.24 subtract a negative 1 becomes 8.24 plus a positive 1, and 8.24 plus 1 would be 9.24. Final answer.